It was a wide-ranging yet tightly controlled tour. The first time in 8 years journalists have been allowed to enter the controversial Bagram jail.
This is the Strategic Debriefing Center, and this is the Joint Intelligence Debriefing Center.
The US military are keen to show off a newly built and soon-to-be open prison block. The Obama administration, which has promised to close Guantanamo Bay jail in Cuba, opening an expanded prison here in Afghanistan.
Each cell is designed to hold 20 detainees for a total
We were
of
shown the
320
cells
per building.
where up to 20 prisoners sleep. There's a latrine area at the back of each cell. This, the solitary confinement area, where those who break prison regulations will be sent. The authorities were keen to emphasise the natural light in much of the complex, the educational and recreational areas, and the medical facilities. What we didn't see were the detainees. The military say they're now holding about 700 men, about 30 of them are not Afghan, and about 5 are juveniles. They've not yet been transferred from the old prison, where cameras have never been allowed. The military leadership now admit the secrecy of the past may have been a mistake.
Well, General McChrystal, in his initial assessment of 30 August to Secretary Gates and to the President, acknowledges that detention, if not done properly, can actually harm the effort. So there is. I mean, we are a learning organization. The development of counterinsurgency doctrine over the last 7 years, I think, is illustrative of that.
The military are keen to show off this brand new facility that costs some $60 million. But the prisoners who will soon be moved here remain in legal limbo. They haven't been charged with any crime. No civilian lawyer has ever been allowed inside Bagram.
The US military says the plan is to eventually transfer control of this prison to the Afghan government. The United States is the only country out of 43 nations in the NATO force here that runs its own detention facilities. All the other countries hand over those they capture to the Afghan authorities.
And James joins us now live from Kabul. James, why have journalists been allowed to have a look around this facility? Because that's unprecedented.
It is, and I think it's because this prison has become notorious. It's become notorious around the world, as Guantanamo has, but more importantly, it's become notorious here in Afghanistan. I think it was interesting when we looked round the prison that the first tour was for the Afghan journalists, and then the tour I was on was for the international journalists to see round and to see this new facility inside Bagram and what goes on there. They know that many people here in Afghanistan talk about Bagram. They talk about Bagram as a black hole. They talk about so many stories about Bagram, and whether those stories are true or false, the perception among ordinary Afghans of Bagram is very, very negative, and I think they're trying to change that.
I mean, one of the things that you mentioned is that the US military doesn't hand over prisoners that it captures to the Afghan authorities. What is the thinking behind that, and what do the Afghans themselves think of that?
Well, they do hand over some prisoners after they've been through a procedure, but not a judicial procedure, an administrative procedure to see if prisoners are still a danger. And then they do hand over some of them to the Afghan legal system, and they do release other prisoners. But there is great concern about this whole procedure here in Afghanistan. Hamid Karzai, the president of Afghanistan, during his election campaign, said he'd no longer tolerate a system where Afghans were held in their own countries, in prisons that are run by foreigners. That was his campaign pledge. We approached the press officer of the presidential palace today. They said no comment today to the president's existing or current position on this new wing of Bagram jail.
And just briefly, James, the fact that this new facility is being invested in quite heavily, the implication is that US troops are going to be active in Afghanistan for quite some time to come.
Well, they're talking about handing this facility eventually over to the Afghan authorities, but we pressed them about a time frame for that handover, and they said they couldn't really give us a time frame for that handover. They made it quite clear to us that they think that what they have here in Bagram, and many human rights lawyers disagree, is a facility that complies with the Geneva Convention, and a facility that they say they need to have. They cited to me the possibility that if there was, in some cases, a trial that took place, it could reveal an important military source, a source that is important on the battlefield. That's one reason, they say, why they have to keep this sort of military internment camp open.
OK, James, thanks very much indeed for that. James Bayes in Kabul there, and we'll be getting more live reaction to the new facility at Bagram a little later in the programme.